This is a reading of Death and Daisy's Folly by Robin Page, the third of the Victorian mystery series. I am not a native English speaker, but I will try my very best to pronounce things how they are written in this very book. Pardon for any mispronunciations. Chapter 1. Death surprises us in the midst of our hopes. Thomas Fuller, Pneumologia, 1732. A cock was crowing in the coop at the foot of the dark orchard when Harry Gordon, groom to His Highness the Prince of Wales, entered the stable. Inside, the air was warm after the early morning chill, scented with the earthy fragrance of horse and hay, and in the gloom Harry could hear the delicate music of pigeons cooing and the gentle waffle of a horse. In all his 15 years, Harry had found no better place on a frosty morning than the inside of a grand stable. The stables here at Easton Lodge were not as large or as modern as those at Sandringham, where His Highness' 3 great sires stood to stud, servicing something like 100 mares a year, in addition to the Prince's own brood stock. But the Easton Lodge stables were not inconsiderable. The Countess of Warwick, whose family home this was, kept her own horses here, together with the tall chestnut hunter left by the Prince for his frequent visits. This morning the stable was full of horses brought in for any of the weekend guests who might choose to ride. Harry walked down the aisle between the shoulder-high wooden stalls, admiring the handsome horses and still marvelling at the amazing fortune that had brought him here so far from home. Until a month ago he had been one of the dozen or so Sandringham stable boys assigned to curry and feed His Royal Highness's horses and mock out the stalls. He had never been farther from the estate than the village school 2 miles away, and for that only the few obligatory years required to spell his tedious way through the Royal Reader. Having emerged from his education nearly unlettered, he had gone to service in the Sandringham stables, and had yet to earn sufficient holiday to make the half-day walk to the nearby market town. But all that was changed, and now the whole world lay at Harry's feet. A few weeks ago he had saved the Princess of Wales from a nasty fall by grasping at the reins of a rearing horse, frightened by a stable cat. The Prince and Princess, known for their loyalty towards those who served them well, had thanked Harry graciously. The next day Princess Alexandra had sent his mother, an undercook in the Sandringham kitchens, a basket of jellies and sweets with a handwritten note of praise for her son's courage. The day after that, the chief steward of the stables had summoned the 15-year-old boy, bestowed on him a smart new livery, and instructed him to make himself ready to join the royal entourage. Harry was to travel with the prince and attend His Highness's horses wherever they might be stabled. Harry's remarkable elevation in rank had been the proudest moment of his young life, and that of his mother as well. Her son's unexpected distinction gave her something to boast at over tea in the servants' hall. So handsome in his livery he is, she was heard to tell the gossips in the kitchen, that he is bound to catch the eye of the Queen when the Prince next to Balmoral. Then he'll be raised to his proper station as royal footman, he will, and he'll powder his hair and wear a pink poplin knee breeches and shiny silver paulets the size of portlets, with or without epaulets. Harry was proud to be numbered among the Prince's travelling household. At Sandringham, the stable boys were at the bottom of the servants' hierarchy, grubbing in the muck and the mire, as his mother said, far below the elevation of the senior staff, the upper 10, or the uppers, as they were called. Life on the lowest rung of this social ladder often entailed cold food, scanty victuals, and meagre holidays. But on tour with the Prince, Harry had discovered to his delight his life was quite different. Here at Easton, for instance, where distinctions of rank were observed below stairs as carefully as they were above, Harry, a mere groom, outranked not only the Countess's stable boys and grooms, but her ladyship's chief groom as well, or so it seemed to Harry. At meals and between he was awarded all the honours befitting his status, such as slices of grouse and pheasant left from the table, and magnificent sweets, and even a glass of the estate's best home-brewed beer, served by a solicitous kitchen maid with a seductive smile. For Harry, life had suddenly become very sweet. The royal stall, which housed Qa'Rajh, the prince's hunter, was marked with the prince's insignia. Harry stopped before it, set down the wooden bucket filled with oats, and cocked his head, frowning slightly. In the dimness, Qa'Rajh was moving about, stamping a nervous forefoot, flicking an anxious tail. Something had disturbed him. It was none of the eastern grooms or stable boys, Harry knew. They were a lazy lot and had arrived at the servants' breakfast late, accepting the reprimand with sleepy-eyed equanimity. It was none of the gentlemen either, for although one or another might rise for a dawn canter across the Essex hills, last night's entertainment, parlour games, Harry had understood from the footman's sly comments at breakfast, had been late and boisterous. Breakfast was already laid upstairs for the earliest risers, but Harry would have wagered a tanner that none were yet out and about. He had lost his money. While the young groom was still pondering the horse's nervousness, a nearby door opened with a creak. A man, a gentleman wearing Norfolk tweeds and a shooting cap, a stick under his arm, was briefly silhouetted against the light, then slipped inside and closed the door. He moved furtively, and Harry's frown became a knowing grin. Surreptitious assignations were commonplace at the country house parties, according to the footman who had reported on last night's frolic. While Harry personally felt that such a rendezvous was more appropriate to a lady's chamber, behind a discreetly closed door and between scented sheets, he could also imagine that a more daring lady, or one whose husband had a jealous turn, might prefer to carry on her amorous intrigues somewhere else, in the straw even. Harry grew warm, recalling the brazen allure of the kitchen maid who had placed her hand on his. But now was not the moment for such thoughts, pleasant as they were. Silently he raised the wooden bar and slipped into the royal stall, ducking under Qa'Rajh's warm belly. If a lady were expected, she would no doubt soon appear, and it would not be prudent of Harry to make his presence known. Best wait in the stall until the business were over. But Harry had as much curiosity as the next man, and he wanted to see which of the ladies had consented to a tryst in the stable. Was it the red-haired one he glimpsed sweeping across the croquet lawn yesterday afternoon, hair flowing like flaming embers? He had heard that the red-haired women were looser in their morals than other women, and she was said to be an American. Perhaps. The door creaked again. Harry stood up to peer over the side of the stall. He saw a cloaked woman enter and close the door, stand still for a moment as if getting her bearings. "Over here," came the husky voices of the waiting man, and the cloaked woman turned swiftly. The light was poor, but Harry did not think it was the red-haired lady. It might even have been a slender man. Unfortunately, the answering voice offered no clue. It was low and husky and had a certain sweetness, but it could have been that of either a woman or a man. "Where's your colleague?" the cloaked figure asked. "I assumed that he would be here as well." "Momentarily," the other replied. His voice was eager. "Then you have decided to join us?" "Quite on the contrary. I wish no part of this sordid business, and I have come to tell you so. I am a loyal subject of the crown. Some of the things you have proposed would be deeply embarrassing and might even tend toward treason." Treason, Harry thought. All idea of a tryst flying out of his head. A plot against the prince. What were they scheming? An accident to the royal person? A plan to blow up the royal train? He had better listen closely so that he could report the conversation to the proper authorities, to the prince himself, perhaps. His reward would certainly be that pair of silvery paulettes his mother was so anxious for him to win. "Oh, but I say," the first man protested, "you have it wrong. All we mean to do is—" Beside Harry, Qa'Rajh moved restlessly, pawing at the straw with a shot hoof. Harry tensed, catching out the corner of his eye a fleeting movement in the shadows behind him. He turned and saw a pale face looming over the side of the stall, a hand upraised, wielding a heavy object, about to strike. And that was the last thing that Harry saw.